I got a letter at the end of last week. The last couple of weekends I've been on the road, so 2 weeks ago I guess it was Dodge City, and then Houston, Dallas, Tulsa. This last weekend was Wichita, Chicago, Atlanta, and back. But it was last week I think I got the letter dated March 30th, so it got to me after that. It's from a woman who was in Orlando, Florida at the International Technology and Education Conference to receive the Teacher of Excellence Award for the state of Colorado. They recognize the outstanding teachers in each of the states. And she wrote me a nice letter that said that I had the fortune to watch one of the tech competitions that included the Fort Hays students. The competition was an underwater robot that required the robot to place a cap on a PVC pipe in a pool, and the controllers had to be 20 foot away from the little submarine, I guess. Most of the robots were very predictable in their design, but the Fort Hays students had a design unlike any other in the competition. And their design had an electromagnetic release that actually put the cap on top of the PVC pipe. It'd be kind of like capping a runaway well underwater kind of ceremony or kind of event. Their design was incredible, and they were very, very successful. And so she was impressed and wanted me to know that. She said the next morning the general session speaker, who was Jimmy E. Davis, an alum of Morehouse, president of STEM Florida Incorporated, and an engineer at Merit Corporation, was the keynote speaker. Before he started to talk, he spent 10 minutes talking about the fact that he took time the night before to walk around and see what was going on at the conference. And he had the opportunity to observe the Fort Hays students in a manufacturing contest. He said he didn't even know where Fort Hays State was. He spent several minutes talking to the general session at the opening about how these students and their advisor, Chris, couldn't remember the last name, we all know who that is, inspired him and made him want to visit Fort Hays. And he has contacted me and is trying to arrange to come out and find out how we produce students that do the amazing things that we do. I get lots of letters. They don't always compliment our faculty the way this letter does, but I wanted to share that with you because there are literally hundreds of examples of our faculty going out and representing the university in ways that are just phenomenal in nature. Rob would quickly say, what do you expect from the College of Education, right? The two items that I did want to talk about was first the Dodge City affiliation that has gotten some press lately, and will get a lot more press. This discussion started in 92, 93. On both of these subjects, individuals, some of you have come up to me and say, Dr. Hammond, why did you want to do this in your last year? I mean, why are you taking on this kind of gorilla? Well, in neither case are they starting right now. This one started in 1992 and 93 when the governor of the state of Kansas called me and St. Mary's the Plains was closing down. And the governor said, do you want to, does Fort Hays want to take over St. Mary's the Plains? And after giving some thought to it and what we were involved in and seeking advice from the regents, I said no. That led to another discussion with the governor that said, would you serve as the custodian of St. Mary's the Plains? And I said, what does that mean? And we since found out that what that meant was we got all the records. And so any graduate of St. Mary's the Plains that needs a transcript or needs verification that they were enrolled or anything like that comes to Fort Hays, and our registrar's office produces that for St. Mary's the Plains just like they produce it for any of our graduates. Because of us being the legal custodian, on two different occasions after that we were offered the great opportunity to have given to us that huge aircraft building that St. Mary's Plains had. And after having architects and Warren Corman and others go through the building, their advice was it would have cost us many, many millions of dollars to renovate that and get it up to state standards, and the asbestos problem there was phenomenal. So we turned down those opportunities. But almost yearly since then, at some point in time, whether it be an informal event at Dodge City Country Club or something, the whole issue of a 4-year presence in Dodge City in southwest Kansas has been discussed. So it's not a new topic, it's a topic that's been around for over 20 years, with me anyway. As you know, we have been part of a couple of attempts to respond to that. In the mid-late 90s, we were involved with Dodge City Community College to propose a merger affiliation between Barton County Community College and Fort Hays State. That proposal was unanimously approved by their board and flowed through us to the Board of Ed, because community college at that time were under the Kansas Board of Regents, or not under the Kansas Board of Regents, but under the Kansas Board of Ed. And they, at the urging of the community colleges, voted it down. So that didn't proceed. Then about 6 years later, Pratt Community College Board voted unanimously, and Pratt County had a vote of the electorate and passed about 2-1, a little better than 2-1, to merge Pratt Community College and Fort Hays State, to make that a branch campus in effect, or another campus of Fort Hays State University. That one did go to the Board of Regents after it was approved by us, approved by them and their board, went to the Board of Regents, and the Board of Regents voted 4 in favor and 5 against. And that merger attempt or suggestion failed. So this is the third time in my tenure as president that we've had a community college board vote unanimously to affiliate or merge, or whatever language you want to use, with Fort Hays State University. The interest in Dodge City has been growing in the last few years. There have been many, many discussions. And after the last change in administrations in Topeka 3 years ago, those discussions began carrying a little bit more substance, because there were people in Topeka that were interested in trying to find a solution to the dilemma of, well, southwest Kansas is the only quarter of the state that has no 4-year institution. And the Department of Commerce has been interested in this solution as well, or this issue. And part of that, I think, is tied to who the secretary is, who is very, very committed to Dodge City. His family, longtime residents of Dodge City. And there's been increasing legal and legislative interest in it over the last few years. So 2 years ago, and I guess it was 12, the governor provided us his airplane, and we took a team of people involving some people from Fort Hays State, and Chris and Rob were on that trip. Some people from Dodge City and a bunch of people from Topeka and the Board of Regents, and we all got in the plane and we flew to Oklahoma to look at a campus of Oklahoma State University that was supposed to be a model that maybe we could look at to tweak or do something with. So as you can see, this isn't a topic that in my last year as president, all of a sudden I've decided, oh, this is a great opportunity, we need to move on this right now. It's been something that's been going on for some time. In my discussions with all of these folks, I've made a couple things clear. One is that Fort Hays State would be very interested. We have a primary mission of helping serve and support Western Kansas. So we definitely are interested. But we would not be interested if in any way this activity had a negative impact on our budget or had a negative impact on our programs. Much like the virtual college and the China initiative, we need to structure it in such a way that it doesn't have any ability to harm our primary mission, which is the on-campus environment here at Fort Hays State University. As a result, the Topeka folks involved in the discussion also had parameters that they wanted to place on the discussion. And one of them was they were not going to create a seventh university. They were not going to create a standalone university. And their clear direction to the Dodge City folks that were, and there was a task force of community leaders that were working on this, direction to them was, well, you need to partner with Fort Hays State University. Also, they indicated that the entity there should be a Regents institution. So it would be governed by the Kansas Board of Regents. Similar to both the proposals that we made at Pratt and Barton County, and similar to K-State Salina, or the more recent example of Washburn and Topeka Tech. That had a merger affiliation here in the last year. The belief is that if you were to merge the two institutions together, there are certain economies of scale. You back office functions, you have one financial aid system, you have one admission system, and that was attractive because any way we can be more efficient is smart on behalf of the state and the citizens. And they also believe that Fort Hays is uniquely positioned to provide this kind of partnership. So, under those directives and parameters, we've developed a white paper, and I want to just walk you quickly through the elements of the white paper right now so that you can be aware of what's being discussed. No final decision has been made, and I'll get to the timeline and decision tree in just a minute. But the white paper clearly indicates that FHSU at Dodge City will be a regional baccalaureate center for Southwest Kansas. The academic center would have 3 different academic units, but not colleges like we have with faculty. It would have a lower division college, which could have one tuition rate if we wanted. We could have differential tuition. And we've looked at that from a budgetary standpoint. An upper division college, which would have our baccalaureate programs. The lower divisional college would have all of the associate programs, the certificates, the services that Dodge City Community College provides its community. The upper divisional college, which would be the smaller of the 3, I really don't think would be bigger than 400 to 500 students, and would be a combination of face-to-face and virtual delivery. If there was enough of students there that we could teach face-to-face, we would do that. If there wasn't enough students, we would plug them into our virtual product. And our experience has been, in working in Southwest Kansas for some time, that it's easy to, out of high school, to identify a cohort of people that want a particular degree, but then when they go in the community college, at the end of 2 years, there's a very small percentage of those that are actually moving on into the baccalaureate program. And it also seems to be cyclical, meaning that there may be a need for an accounting program for a few years, but then after you meet that need, it kind of goes away until it builds up again. And so you have cyclical demand, and you have a kind of a significant attrition from identifying a group entering a 4-year program and getting through the first 2 years of that 4-year program. The third of the academic programs or academic units is a technical institute that is clearly unique and would bring students from not only Kansas but all over the Midwest to the Dodge City campus. It would be based around 10 corporate partnerships. The curriculum for those students would be designed in concert with those partners. The example we use, because of the legislator that's involved in some of the discussions, also is an Estes that owns BTI and John Deere. That if one of the partnerships were with John Deere, the students would come in and we'd say we'd limit it to only 100 students a year that would be admitted. John Deere would help us recruit those students using their network all over the country. They could identify students for this program. And the students would start, and at the end of 1 year they could leave if they wanted to with a certificate. And they would be mapped into a whole series of kind of jobs that they would qualify for at that level. Maybe mechanics in the dealerships or something along that line, or working in the production facilities in either Cedar Rapids or Cedar Falls, Iowa, or someplace like that. If they stayed and went on to the second year, they would earn an associate degree, and they would also be involved in their first co-op experience. These students would be going to school basically 12 months a year. 2 semesters they would be on campus, and 1 semester they would be working somewhere in the corporate structure of the partnership. Co-op model education is not anything new. It's used a lot in engineering. There's some institutions like Northwestern in Boston is heavily co-op in all of its areas. So it's not something that we're creating, but it means that the students not only would be getting some academic credit for that activity, but they'd be earning some income as they work their way through. But at the end of 2 years, it would be possible for them to complete associate degree, and then that would map them into another series of jobs, maybe parts manager at a dealership or something along those lines. If they stayed on and completed the 4 year, they would get their bachelor's degree from Fort Hays State University. All the degrees would be awarded by Fort Hays because we would be a Regents institution with that campus there as well. And at that point, they would be mapped into different sets of jobs. So we would start with sitting down with a business partner and saying, okay, where do you need help with your labor force? What kind of skills do they need? And how can we design a program that can get a variety of students to that particular area? So I think the Institute would have probably about 2,000 students in it, would be my guess. Could have more, but I think it's pretty safe to say they have a couple of thousand. The lower division would probably have about 1,500, and the upper division about 500. I see about 4,000 possible students on the campus. That right now is built for just shy of 2,000 students in Dodge City. The Technical Institute would require a new building, and so the state of Kansas would have to appropriate at least $10 million to support that, and the community has said that it could raise some money for this project too. So if we needed more money, they're open to raising additional resources for that building. The equipment of the building would be provided by our business partners. Even some of the faculty may be provided by our business partners. They may have visiting faculty that would be released from the company in different places that would come teach in this program. So it'd be very much a partnership ongoing with Fort Hays State University. We would operate the Dodge City campus. Fort Hays State would provide oversight over all activities and functions because it's a Regents institution. All ongoing full-time employees would be FHSU employees, which is one of the things that concerns the Dodge City faculty and staff. What does that mean? Can we keep capers? And the answer is yes. We figured that out with Pratt. We could do that. They could switch if they wanted to TI-Craft, or they could keep capers. They have programs. They have questions about, what about our rank? What about their version of tenure? Their version of tenure is a lot like K through 12. It's not like our version of tenure. And as I told them, we would do the same thing we do in Pratt, we did with Pratt, is we would get some of their faculty and we would get some of our faculty from the departments that are impacted by this, and we get them together and we try to figure out the best solutions to move forward. And those kind of groups will be put together in the next week or so. I think we'll begin to look at how we build some of those cooperative discussions as we move forward. The Dodge City trustees would remain in existence because the taxing district requires that they have an elected board of their citizens. And the trustees would be responsible for the ownership of all the property and its development, its security, and its maintenance, and its utilities. The Dodge City community and Ford County have invested a lot of money in the campus. We're not asking them to give that to the state of Kansas. They continue ownership. And in all honesty, we don't want to assume the financial liability to maintain it. So they're going to have sufficient mill levy support to take care of the buildings and keep them up to our standards and do all the other things. We're not assuming that responsibility. The trustees' taxing authority would generate sufficient revenue to fulfill their ownership responsibility. And if they want to have intercollegiate athletics as part of this upper divisional or this baccalaureate center, that would be their call. But if they do, they're going to have to pay for intercollegiate athletics out of their mill levy. We're not paying for it out of the academic funds that we would be having. If they want to keep a Ford County scholarship program, they would have to fund that with the tax dollars that would be available to them. And that, they have the lawful purpose as trustees to do that, so that's not a problem. Tuition would be established by the Board of Regents, same way as we establish tuition for programs here. In the event that down the road this program would, because the state's going to have to fund it, I've told everyone that we've talked to, you not only give us one-time money to build a building, you're going to increase our budget by $5 million. To give you some idea, this year our budget's what, $32 million, right, from the state? So $5 million increase in state general fund is a substantial increase, but that's what we calculate we need to have in order to make sure that it has no negative drain on us. In fact, it probably would produce some benefit for us, but over the long haul. But down the road, if the state starts and then stops funding it, we would there would be part of the agreement that says we could end the agreement, and the buildings are still owned by the citizens. They could go back to operating a community college if they so deemed that was what they wanted to do. So that's what's spelled out in the white paper. If any of you are interested in a copy, we'll be happy to make one available to you. It is interesting. There's people on campus that are concerned, but the vast majority of the citizens, the business community, the political leaders of Dodge City are all on board with what's being proposed. So the discussions are moving ahead. Timeline, the earliest that the legislature can act on our request, they're going to have to do three things. They're going to have to provide us enabling legislation that permits this. They'll have to provide us the money for the building, and they'll have to increase our state general fund by $5 million. If they don't do those things, we're not doing it, because there's no way I could guarantee to the new president coming in that we could fulfill our requirement to make sure that this does not have any negative impact on Fort Hays State University. So those three things would have to take place. The earliest they could take place would be next year, next spring. If that were to happen, we would then proceed with designing a building and getting a building up, which would probably take a year or more. I think the earliest that this would become a reality is probably fall of 16. Would be the earliest that I think it could occur. Even though I'm getting emails from current students at Dodge City Community College wanting to know when this is going to start. But there's lots of steps in the process that need to play out in order to see it to be a reality. And as you can tell, there's lots of blank spaces on this canvas. And we will be, as we did in Pratt, we'll be using the departments that are most impacted by this and faculty who have an interest in this subject to get involved in helping us design and paint the rest of that picture. Let me stop there and see if you have any questions on the affiliation discussion that's going on. Yes?
Can't hear the question.
The question, well, I'll repeat the questions. The question is what happens to students that are in the pipeline if the the plug is pulled in 10 years from now? We get started, we run 10 years, and the state says, we're not going to fund you at $5 million a year. And we say, well, we're not going to do it. What happens to the students in the pipeline, and what happens to faculty that are involved in it? The students, we would have a legal obligation to teach out the same way now. If we end an academic program, because we have an enrollment contract with the students, we need to give them a reasonable period of time to fulfill that enrollment contract. So there would be some phase-out responsibility for the students. The faculty, if we hire additional faculty, they would be hired into this modality separate from the campus, much like international faculty or virtual faculty. So at least my thinking right now, that's the way we go, but that decision hasn't been made either yet. So we've got to still define how we do that. Some of their faculty have PhDs and terminal degrees, and some of their faculty do not. Some of their technical faculty, I believe, don't even have a bachelor's degree. And they asked me when I went down and met with them, you know, what happens? And I said, you have nothing to worry about if you meet the minimum standards for HLI, for the Higher Education Learning Commission. If you meet the Higher Education Learning Commission standards, I'm sure we can figure out a way to do it. If you don't meet the Higher Education Learning Commission standards, then we're not going to be able to do it. But they shouldn't have anybody that doesn't meet those standards there now anyway. Anything else? Yes?
What departments have you identified?
I have not really gotten into that discussion yet. With them, we had the general meeting last week ago, Friday. They had a meeting last Friday with some state officials, came down and met with them. They wanted to know, can we have both? Can we keep the community college and have a university? And they were told no. I didn't go to that meeting because I told them before, and I think they just wanted to know. There is also a meeting Thursday in Dodge City, I think, further discussion. Does that answer your question? Yeah, that's the next thing. I've talked to the president, and I've asked Don to give me the names of the faculty that he thinks he would need to have involved in what departments, what programs, and then we would look at, I'd turn to Chris and I'd say, sit down with the deans and let's find out which departments have the most interest in this, and we would pick those, as we did in Pratt. Yes?
Before takes faculty travel to Dodge to teach classes there, when I first think that was, I wouldn't say common, but there were people, faculty who chose to drive to Jersey and did that maybe on Saturday, Friday on Saturday. Do you see that as part of this plan?
It could happen. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. The faculty that did that voluntarily. It was our virtual college, the early days of our distance learning. We called it windshield communication. We get behind the windshield and drive to various places. They sometimes even provided us a dorm room. We'd drive down, teach one afternoon and evening, sleep in the next morning, teach the next, and come back, and another one would go down. We then moved to two-way interactive video, and now, of course, you know, we offer mostly online. The two-way interactive video connectivity is still there, and it's a lot greater now than it used to be. Still hooked into Dodge City substantially. We don't use it very much. So I would think there would be a higher probability that faculty would be teaching here and maybe have some students in that class that would be in a classroom in Dodge City. But with the virtual college and so many of our programs on the virtual college, if they don't have the critical mass to justify face-to-face teaching, we probably use more virtual. Now, if they've got a critical mass, we would do our best. We have a full-time faculty member in Dodge City already. The College of Ed, because their programs already has a full-time faculty member, tenure-track faculty member in Dodge. So I could see us adding more faculty there if the demand, was if it justified it. But our experience has been that it's been real hard to get that common demand over a long period of time for any programs in Southwest Kansas. The closest we've been to succeeding is probably social work. I saw Brett coming in earlier, and we've been pretty, 12 to 15 or so students?
That's about right. We're 3 cohorts every 3 years.
Start a new cohort every 3 years, so we aren't starting a new program every year, but that could be another solution, would be that we don't start a cohort every year, we do it every 3rd year or something. And for a while we had a faculty member in social work down there as well. We don't any longer, I don't believe. Any other questions? Here and then back.
My question is really about the course catalog. I think that we provide the basic foundations class, and what I need to be thinking about planning is working stuff up over the next couple of years. Are we going to allow the foundations classes to be structured differently at each location? Has that even come up?
Yes, it came up in the discussion with them, and no, we have not made any decisions. But as I told the faculty member there that asked that same question, is the Board of Regents has been spending, I don't know how many years, making sure all those foundation classes were similar. Now, you and I both know that fundamentals of speech, even though it's taught almost exactly the same, it differs from faculty member to faculty member. So you're not going to get exactly the same class, and nor should you. And so, but with the work that the Regents have done, I can't imagine there's many courses that we're talking about at that lower division that hasn't been already addressed by that alignment effort that you all, many of you have been involved in for the last, 3 years, I guess, Chris? At least 3 years. So I think without that alignment work that's been done, it would make it really difficult. But with that, it's going to make it a lot simpler, I would think, in those courses. Yes? Would this partnership increase enrollment here? I believe it would, because if we are offering lower division courses, and they're Fort Hays numbered and Fort Hays courses, and we have some of our faculty, we're going to be able to develop a relationship with students that should help more of them who want to leave Dodge and come to a campus, come here versus going other places. We get a limited number of students from Dodge now. I believe we would get a lot more because they would be more in tune with our curriculum and with our flow, and have relationships with some of our faculty.
You've identified John Deere as one important partner. Have we identified them?
We have not identified any partners. John Deere was an example. There have been no work on the partners. And the reason is it's a chicken and egg issue. Like you like to point out sometimes when we talk, what comes first? I say, I want to see the cash. And then we'll go negotiate the partnerships. They're saying it sure would be good to have some partnerships to get the legislators to give us the cash. I'm sure there's going to be a compromise here in the next year at some point as we move. But it's hard to go to a corporate entity and say, okay, we want you to work with our faculty to develop this and go to all of the effort, and then say, I'm sorry, but the legislature isn't going to fund this. That's not going to, endear us to them in any way, shape, or form. Yes?
Have the Board of Regents voted on this?
No. That's the decision tree. That's the last thing. So Pratt had to vote first. Then it goes to the Board of Regents. They will be briefed at this next meeting and then they will review it and make a decision at some point in time over the next few months. If they say yes, then it will go to the governor and the budget director, because they're going to have to put it in the budget. And if they say yes, then it will go to the legislature. If they're saying no, I'm not taking it to the legislature, or I'm not going to recommend we burn our political capital to get this unless it's being supported. And so if they say yes, it will then go to the legislature, and the legislature will have to approve it and allocate the resources, and at that point then the governor will sign it and it'll become law. Yes, then we'll come back over here.
You said that in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we'll be meeting with faculty from...
I said we'd be establishing those groups in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I had a discussion with the president at Dodge City Community College Friday about would he take a look and see which of their groups and which programs we would need to interface with. And he said he would do that and get back to me this week, and he hasn't gotten back to me yet. As soon as I get that, I was going to give it to Chris and the deans to begin to look at, how we put together our side of that team for those discussions.
So would Dodge City Community College continue to exist, or are they no more than?
Dodge City Community College as a degree granting entity would not exist if all of this occurs. Their campus would continue to exist and would be owned by the citizens of Ford County. Because it has to be a Regents institution, so we would be the ones granting the degrees.
President Hammond, you're a man of great vision, and you have had a number of amazing visions that you've seen realized in your time here. And I'd like to know just more of from a reflection that you might give on this, how it feels to you personally to be envisioning something that others, are going to be implementing and seeing brought to reality. And is that it seems to me like that's such a great gift that you're giving of your imagination and your vision. I just like to, if you could respond to that, sir.
Well, I feel very good about my decision to resign. You want more of an answer? I believe that I have tremendous faith in the administrative team we have here and the faculty we have here. I watched how our faculty worked with Pratt in that discussion for a year. We had people, busloads of them coming up here. We actually took busloads of people down there to meet with them. And we developed a respect. And it's kind of funny. You take faculty from two different institutions that are perceived to be different, and their perception is, well, the Fort Hays faculty are going to look down their noses at us. It's just like when I talk to some of you and you're going off to these meetings on alignment, and you say, well, I know the KU faculty aren't going to pay any attention to what I say anyway. And, we're all in the boat to try to make our students successful. What I know about this place is that in the end, Fort Hays faculty, Fort Hays staff, Fort Hays administrative team will do what's right for students. And clearly this is a win-win. I mean, the students are going to have a tremendous win. It's going to be a win for Southwest Kansas, it'll be a win for the state, and it's a win for Fort Hays too. So I'm not at all concerned about the transition. And so I know when we went in to see the governor, Regent Logan and I, Chairman and I, went to see the governor to tell him I was going to be retiring. The governor turned to the chairman. He says, "You cannot permit this to happen." And Fred says, "You don't know Ed Hammond very well, do you?" And everyone laughed. And that's because the governor knew that this was underway. And he says, "Ed, I need your commitment that you'll do everything you can, because if you come and you propose it to legislature, it has a good chance of flying. And so I've said, if this project is going to move forward, I will do everything I can to try to help it, because I think it is a win-win. So while there will only be one president, and it isn't going to be me, and he or she will be able to make the call, I'm hopeful that what we have structured so far will not disadvantage us, and puts them in a very strong position to negotiate as we move forward. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, here and then,
I saw in the paper that their board of trustees voted to approve it. What was the sense of that? Were they on board with this? Or how did it go?
I had a chance to meet with them a week ago Friday. Chris went down with me, so I should maybe yield to his observation, because I was sitting up there with the two members of their board. The president didn't sit next to me. I offered the chance. I don't think he wanted to be in the line of fire. They did not have, even though these discussions have been going on for years and years and years, I don't think they really realized how close it was to becoming a reality. And now that it is a reality, they wish they would have attended some of those meetings they didn't attend over the years, I think. But so it was a shock to them. There are a number of them that have real questions as to how it's going to work. And some very good questions, and that's what we've got to figure out. The bonded indebtedness on their new dormitories. They pledged student activity fees as well as their rent revenue. And our accountants will quickly tell you that that's going to be difficult to do that with the board that issued the bonds and is responsible for it only have ability to put for rent now, but they could use the mill levy revenues, which are substantial in Ford County. They could use those possibly. They'd have to change the covenants or some things. All of these things can be worked out. It's just we've got to figure out what all those things are and get them worked out. So some very good comments came up. A lot of anxiety. Is that fair? Yeah. Yes.
So why not City? Are there any other community college candidates?
The question is, why Dodge City? Are there other community college candidates? And the answer is, to the last question, no. It has been Dodge City and only Dodge City that's been discussed. And primarily, I think, because St. Mary's the Plains was there, and they're trying to replace that for that community in southwest Kansas. I think that's one of the major reasons, Dodge City. And then I think right now, where you have the Secretary of Commerce from Dodge City, you have a very powerful state senator from that area, you've got the governor interested in that area, trying to do something for southwest Kansas. Northwest Kansas, we've got a major state university in northwest Kansas. We only have about 80,000. Ken Stewart was adding it up one day. I don't know what the number ever came to, but we have about 80,000 or so people here in northwest Kansas, of which 30,000 or more are from Ellis County. And there's 200,000 probably in southwest Kansas, so there are a lot more people, but they have no four-year institution, accredited institution. I have to say accredited because there's a non-accredited school down there that sent me a note saying, no, we're down here. Barclay College is there, but it's not accredited. It's a non-accredited school by Higher Education Learning Commission in North Central. Any other questions?